Hey there guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my fantasy fight series. So, sorry it took me too long to get round to doing this one. It's just I had a few other projects I was working on, some other stuff that was taking up my time, so I didn't get round to doing this. But a few people did ask me to talk about this fight and add it to the fantasy fight series, and it's a really intriguing one. This now, for those of you who don't know, this fight was actually in negotiations back in 2012. It was, I believe, it was actually set to happen, and I remember at the time being somewhat excited about it because I was a big fan of both of these guys even back then. And it was a fight that it would have been, I think, Triple G's first fight in America, if I remember rightly, because he was more so fighting in Germany around about that time. And Pirog had fought in America before. He fought there when he won the title against Jacobs. And other than that, most of his career was in Russia. But this would have been, I guess it wouldn't have been a massive fight in terms of, the interest surrounding it, but it would have been a good one for the hardcore boxing fans because obviously back then, neither one of these guys was really popular with the casuals, but with hardcore boxing fans, there was a lot of growing interest in both of them. So this would have been a really interesting fight, and it would have been an interesting test for Triple G at the time. Unfortunately, though, the fight never happened because Pirog ended up with a back injury and had to pull out. There was rumors that it was going to be postponed, that he was going to come back and challenge Triple G when he was ready, but unfortunately, he just couldn't overcome his injury, and yeah, Pirog ended up retiring, and yeah, he had a successful enough career. I mean, he became world champion, had a few defenses at home in Russia, and ultimately retired undefeated. He was, of course, the WBO champion, winning the title that was vacated or stripped from Sergio Martinez. He won it against Danny Jacobs. Triple G, of course, at that time was also undefeated, and he was the WBA and IBO champion. And yeah, he was sort of a rising star in the division back then. He was definitely not as popular or as prolific as he is now. But back then, that was sort of, when he was still sort of in that transitional period where he was fighting in Germany and Ukraine and places like that. And he wasn't that well known with the Western audiences, and that was why they brought him over to America. So that was Triple G from back then. And when you think of that version of Triple G, and when you think of this fight as a fantasy matchup, don't think of it as Triple G from his most recent fights. Like, don't think of Triple G from the Canelo fights, or Triple G from the Jacobs fight, or Triple G from the Derevyanchenko fight, or even Triple G from the Kell Brook fight, because Triple G from those fights and Triple G from back then, it's like a completely different fighter. Like back then, Triple G was at his prime. He was so much better back then, so much faster, so much more athletic, so much better timing, had so much better stamina. He was a monster back then. That when Triple G was at his prime. Like if you guys didn't watch any of Triple G's fights from that point in his career, I would urge you to go and watch them. Back when he fought the likes of Gregoras Proxer and Adamu and Martin Murray and guys like that. That was Triple G in my opinion, where he was at his peak. He sort of hit his peak after the Lemieux fight, in my opinion. It was after that fight that I started to notice like a drastic decline in his ability, and I think that it was mostly just due to age and the fact that he had such a long and grueling amateur career, and eventually, your body just gives out on you. But I digress. As for Pirog, of course, he pretty much retired in his prime, so we never really got to see him regress. But yeah, I digress. How would this fight have gone if it had have happened back in 2012? I think it would have been a really interesting fight. I think it would have been a very entertaining fight, but I have a very, very clear idea of who I think would have won. And let's talk about it. Now, Dmitry Pirog was, of course, the WBO champion, and he was a very, very technically good fighter and a very unconventional fighter too. One of the things that I think was the standout with Dmitry Pirog was his upper body movement, his head movement, and his reflexes, as well as his counterpunching ability. He was fantastic. This guy, when he was moving forward, his body would be constantly on a swivel. He would effortlessly avoid jabs, effortlessly avoid punches. He would get on the inside of his opponent's jab and the inside of his opponent's punches, and he would be able to counter in close with hooks and uppercuts. He could take away his opponent's jab, could take away his opponent's shots inside. He could shorten his punches. He was very good at shifting and just making you miss and riding with punches to remove the effect of them and stuff like that. And he was just such a technically brilliant and proficient fighter. He completely systematically destructed Danny Jacobs to win the title, and that was a great performance, a fantastic performance with a really impressive knockout. And he was just a really good fighter. As for Triple G, I mean, back then, like I've already said, back then Triple G was an absolute monster. One of the biggest punchers I've ever seen at middleweight. One of the best jabs I have ever seen in the history of boxing. That's one of the things that I don't think Triple G gets enough credit for, is his jab. It's probably one of the most accurate jabs, if not the most accurate jab I've ever seen in boxing. It's like a haymaker. That's how effective it was, man. It was kind of like Kubrat Pulev's jab, but even better. I mean, he had one of the best and most accurate and most efficient left hooks I think I've ever seen in boxing. One of the best chins I've ever seen in boxing. I mean, Triple G is, he's hard as nails, man. The guy is extremely tough, an extremely hard man. Just a great fighter, man. Murderous body puncher, fantastic uppercut. Very, very good at backing his opponents up and cutting off the ring and making that ring feel really small. He was just the ultimate pressure fighter, Triple G. And he was the ultimate all-rounder. He could fight off the back foot, could fight off the front foot. And based on the attributes of both of these guys, I think it would have been a great fight. However, like I said, I have a clear preference of who I think would win. I believe Gennady Golovkin would win this fight, and I believe he would win so by knockout. And I think it would be a knockout in the later rounds. And I think prior to the knockout, he would probably have to survive a scare. And I think that it would be a very attritional fight. I think he'd have a lot of problems in the early rounds with Dmitry Pirog's style and Dmitry Pirog's skills and his speed and his upper body movement. But I think eventually Triple G would figure him out and would eventually get the stoppage. Now, Triple G was actually pretty good at fighting guys who had that kind of style. Now, I mentioned earlier the Grigoras Proxer fight. Grigoras Proxer was another one of these type of herky-jerky fighters, with the hands down, reflexes, head movement, would make you miss, would counter, would hit you with uppercuts and hooks. He was a very awkward and unconventional styled fighter, and Triple G ate him for breakfast. I mean, the battering he put on Grigoras Proxer was savage. It was shocking. I remember that one so clearly, man. It was a brutal knockout and a brutal deconstruction. And what's interesting about that is Grigoras Proxer was the type of fighter that nobody did that to. He was a guy who, when he would lose a fight, it would generally be an opponent just out hustling him and winning a close and scrappy decision. Like his other losses were to guys like Sergio Mora and Kerry Hope, which he avenged by knockout. I remember that fight live, actually, the Kerry Hope fight. He basically cut him with the head and messed his way to a decision. But yeah, my point is that Triple G was able to do a number on that guy and completely figured out that style so quickly, that herky-jerky, reflex-based style. And it was by just cutting off the ring, working the body skillfully, creating openings with the jab and feints and, having vicious intent on absolutely every punch you throw, not buying into that style, not allowing him to confuse you, just doing what you do best and cutting off the ring and just absolutely smashing him to pieces. And Triple G was able to stop guys who were known for their durability and known for not being able to be stopped. Like another one he fought around about that time was Martin Murray. Again, a guy nobody stops. A guy with a granite chin. A guy who was always known for being durable and going the distance. Well, Triple G broke him down and stopped him. So Triple G had a knack for getting the better of these type of opponents. Doing a number on guys who usually are able to go the distance. And one of the things I wanted to point out about Pirog is we don't really know about Pirog's chin because his chin was never really tested at world level. Yeah, he fought Danny Jacobs, who was a big puncher, but Jacobs never really caught him clean. So I don't really know how well he would be able to take a punch from somebody like a prime Triple G. And if we're assessing certain attributes that both of these guys have and making comparisons, it helps to look at who they both fought. For example, both of these guys do have some common opponents. I already mentioned Danny Jacobs, but they also both fought Norihiro Ishida. And Ishida got brutally knocked out cold by Triple G in 3 rounds with a devastating overhand right. That was one of the most brutal knockouts I've ever seen. And sometime before then, he fought Pirog, and he got pretty much dominated and lost on points. But he was able to go the distance with Pirog. Now, the Danny Jacobs situation was essentially the same situation in reverse. Danny Jacobs was knocked out brutally by Pirog. You know, Pirog just broke him down and took him out with a beautifully well placed straight right hand on the chin that just landed at the perfect moment with perfect timing and knocked him out. And when he fought Triple G, of course, he went the distance. He got dropped in the 4th round with a right hand, but he went the distance. So that kind of shows you that you can't always measure who has more power based on the triangle theory, because like I said, Ishida went the distance with Pirog, but he couldn't go the distance with Triple G. Likewise, Jacobs went the distance with Triple G, but he couldn't go the distance with Pirog, and it's all to do with timing. Jacobs got Triple G at a moment where Triple G was on the slide, and likewise, Jacobs himself had improved after the Pirog fight. Jacobs, when he fought Triple G, was in much better condition and had improved his defense and skills and stamina. So, Triple G got a better version of Danny Jacobs, I believe, who had also had a big weight advantage. So, when Jacobs fought Pirog, he was a little bit green. Pirog kind of just old manned him and systematically broke him down. So, I would say that based on the consistency of knockouts, I would say that Triple G definitely showed to be the bigger puncher. From how consistent he was. I mean, having the longest knockout streak in middleweight boxing championship history, and the way he was knocking guys out. Knocking guys out who don't get stopped. People like Proxer and Martin Murray and some of these guys. Triple G was known for knocking these guys out, guys who had granite chins and were awkward. So I definitely think that out of the two guys, Triple G was the bigger puncher, and I cannot see somebody like Pirog stopping Triple G. I just don't think he had the power or the intensity, really. Whereas Triple G had that kind of explosive power and that kind of consistency with his knockout power. He was a very prolific puncher to where I think he would have been able to land his hardest punches, and I think he would have probably broke Pirog down at some point. So quite a quick one, this, to be honest. I think that Triple G might get outboxed for a couple of rounds. He might take a while to find his timing because Pirog was very skilled. But I think at some point Triple G would break him down, work him to the body. He would find a home for that jab. He would eventually land the overhand right. And I think that Triple G personally would break down Dmitry Pirog. And I think he'd win the fight by stoppage. So that's pretty much my prediction for this one. This fantasy fight. I think Triple G would win the fight, and I think he'd win it by knockout in the later rounds. I'd say like from round 8 to 12. So the later rounds for Triple G. Let's just say an 11th round knockout. I think he breaks him down. I think he survives a scare early on, has a few problems, breaks him down, and scores a late stoppage. So let me know what you guys think about this one anyway. I know this was a pretty straightforward one, but it was an interesting one to talk about. So yeah, and it's a real shame that this didn't happen. And let me know in the comment section, what do you guys think would have happened in this fight? And yeah, let me know of any other sort of retrospective boxing videos or any other fantasy fights you want me to talk about, because I do enjoy doing this type of content. I think that these videos are quite fun to make, because it's fun to speculate on fights that never happened and fights that should have happened and stuff like that. And yeah, I enjoyed doing this one. So yeah, Triple G by late stoppage, in my opinion. Let me know if you guys agree or not, and yeah, let me know if you want to see any more videos like this. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more content, and yeah, God bless.